Thank you. Hello. So pleasure to be here to moderate this panel. As I've said, my name is Rebecca Sedler and I lead policy and strategy for EDF in the UK. And I'm joined by a fantastic group this afternoon to talk about innovation in energy at scale. So first, I'd like the speakers on the panel to introduce themselves. So Adele, can I start with you, please?
Of course. Thank you, Rebecca, and good afternoon. My name is Adele. I lead global business operations for Lightsource BP, a joint venture between Lightsource and BP. We are an integrated solar generator, and I'm particularly responsible for our transformation and digitalization strategy. So very much looking forward to touch on these topics today.
Thanks so much, Adele. Guro, can I go to you next, please?
Yes. Hi, I am Guro Knapstad. I work as head of innovation and business development in Glitre Energi, a vertically integrated energy company in Norway. And we do both hydropower production and grid company, utility, and also innovation. So I'm looking forward to share some thoughts with you guys today.
Thank you. Daxita, can I move to you next, please?
Yes, for sure. So thank you, Rebecca. Firstly, welcome and thank you for this opportunity. So I'm Daxita Rajcoomar, Chief Sustainability Officer for ENGIE Asia, Middle East and Africa. So ENGIE is really an energy transition organization focused on decarbonization around promoting renewable energy, power and utility, decarbonization of and desalination processes, as well as district cooling. So we have many fingers around the energy sector when it comes to the whole energy transition market.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm just checking we have Olivia with us because I know she was experiencing some technical problems. Olivia, have you joined the panel? Okay, brilliant. Well, Olivia will be joining us in a while and I'll introduce her at that point. Okay, I've got to say as well, pleasure to be on an all-female panel to discuss energy. That is fantastic. It's certainly a first recently for me. All right, so I'm going to begin the discussion by throwing some questions to the panel, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end of this session for open Q&A from the audience. So please do use Hopin as we progress through to record your questions. All right, starting with the context of, the increased electrification, demand for power, and of course, addressing climate change, which we're all passionate about. What do you think the key challenges and opportunities are for a low carbon economy? Adele, maybe if I can start with you, please, on that.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose I bring the perspective of a solar developer, operator and generator. So the very purpose of Lightsource BP is to bring solar power and solar energy to our world. And so we really believe strongly in our mission of being at the forefront on the energy transition and the decarbonisation journey. Of course, we are, as a type of technology, extremely well placed to facilitate the decentralization of the energy production. It's one of the main characteristics and one of the main abilities of the technology itself that's very well to decentralize the generation and bring it closer to the demand. On the other end, what we are particularly aware of is our very nature of intermittent generation is actually creating not a few headaches to our distribution and transmission systems. Of that, we are aware. And I suppose from the time of the subsidy market to what the competitive solar market is today, we have gone through a maturity course, of course, as developer and generators, and we are very much keen to be part of the solution to the type of challenges that the transmission and distribution network. So what we look at when we look at the future opportunities for us as solar generators is that we cannot look at ourselves as a generator only, but also as a key element to help stabilize and manage the grid better. So anything that is related to storage, whether it is battery or hydrogen, is in our roadmap a conditions for our future development development and for our future success, but also the ability of use the technology that we currently have available for ancillary service and support to the grid, like reactive power, for example, from our own inverters. Ultimately, what we are seeing since the subsidy have kind of disappeared from the landscape, from the financial landscape and economic landscape as generator, is very much a stronger cooperation with corporates and being basically and creating a partnership level with them on their own journey to net zero and to decarbonizing their own energy supply. So these are pretty much where we are seeing our opportunity. Challenges are on a technological perspective, of course. Some of these, let's think about the grid hydrogen, some of these technologies are still being tested and piloted, so they're not deployed at scale as yet. Financially, we still need to make this type of operations or joint operation of storage and solar work effectively and on a scalable basis. And of course, we still need to make sure that we optimize the use of our data properly to further optimize the production and the predictability of our productions. So these are kind of the challenges that as a generator, as a renewable generator, we think we should focus our attention on in the next few years.
That's great, and really interested to have your perspective from a solar developer operator perspective. Guro, have you got any other different perspectives to add to this?
Definitely, and it's interesting for us as a power producing company, and also coming from Norway, which has, I think, 96% green hydropower production in our energy production mix. There is a lot of opportunities that we see in this low carbon economy. And two examples that is important for us would be also taking the fact that Norway has been an early mover with regulation in different markets, for example, electrical vehicles. So for a power company like us, it's interesting, a lot of interesting positions to take along the infrastructure side. And also we are a strong or a historical maritime industry. So we currently see a lot of innovations and piloting ongoing for within hydrogen and ammonia solutions for hard to abate sectors. So I would say opportunities for us is almost also an obligation for a country like Norway and a company like us that has a lot of green energy production to contribute to electrifying as much as possible, and to keep regulations as well in Norway up to speed, and also contribute in partnerships with our competency, because that's something that we see we can do to bring green innovation forward. And challenges for us is quite some quite obvious ones is, of course, building enough grid capacity to serve all the new demand in time. And another thing that we've been focusing a bit on is also getting the people on board, not only having the digital solutions, but also bringing the people along with this innovation journey, including also having people over on this using consumer flexibility tools. So that's an interesting fact actually I can comment is that this hydropower sector, we haven't had the need to innovate for almost 100 years. It's almost the same technology that was used 100 years ago that we do now. So we see this pace of innovation that we see in the hydropower sector these days, that's quite recent. It's within the last 5 years or so that we've seen a really step change there.
Thanks, Guro. Daxita, so anything from ENGIE with regards to these challenges and opportunities?
Well, very much agree with the other panelists here. You know, I'm on the other side of the scale where we are based in oil-rich petroleum countries that still kind of dependent on fossil fuel production for energy. Yes, the pace in terms of clean energy is growing and growing at a rapid pace as well. But we still see the challenges around decarbonizing, having the capital invested that into the traditional power plants, and really changing and decarbonizing those assets. Secondly, with challenges is that the multi-stakeholder engagements that have to be undertaken to start the energy transition to cleaner energy, processes. One of the other challenges, if I could just highlight, is around policy and regulation that is still up and coming around grid capacity, input into the grid, decarbonizing the different sectors in the business. As much as the countries we operate in have strong energy policies in place, it's the actions on the ground that are not necessarily as rapid as we want it to be. In terms of opportunities, yes, as I mentioned, based on the other panelists, renewable energy is gaining ground. It's becoming an increasingly cost-competitive market, making energy transition easier. But whilst that this is the transition or the bridge, there's challenges and scenarios around policy, around grid alignment, allowing capacity based on demand. Storage for clean electricity is still a question and definitely an opportunity for sure, because as much as we want to push the clean, affordable energy around renewables, the issue is about inconsistency in terms of difference of weather patterns. So really around storage of clean energy is a big area of opportunity here in the Middle East and Asia and Asia Pacific that we see is an important element. Over and above that, if you're looking at just the energy sector, I would complement by saying that, we also sitting in a conundrum of the water scarcity issue, which is really the monopoly around desalination processes and the desalination market being in the Middle East region, where we have a big monopoly on clean access to water. So it's how do you also decarbonize this sector? And then at ENGIE, we are at the forefront of this by ensuring that renewable energy is still powering this desalination process that allows, a clean, affordable energy, but whilst at the same time providing clean access to water. So I think there's lots of opportunities in this region. It's just about the rapid pace and tapping into those markets.
Thanks for that. And, so many important themes there. So customer engagement, policy, actually moving at pace to delivery, grid, and all different networks. It's absolutely key. And I guess reflecting on the UK situation and the ambitions that it wants to achieve and is set out to achieve with incredibly ambitious targets for decarbonisation. What do you think the key barriers are that are in place to the UK achieving its goals? For example, the targets in the 10-point plan. Guro, do you have a view on this?
I'm not familiar with the UK details of the plans, but I guess that would be pretty much similar to the Norwegian ones. For gaining, we have also a 55% reduction of CO2 emissions by 2030. And one of the main challenges, of course, for us is this grid development. And to develop it fast enough, and also, I think many people have been discussing the same thing as well, to handle all the amount of consuming power at the same time, weighing it against the costs. So the Norwegian government have established now a working group or a task group to put forward suggestions on how to improve speed of approvals of new grid access. So I think they're making some concrete actions to do it. And it's also having this quicker and more efficient grid development is also a prerequisite for securing green jobs in Norway. Because if we can't have grid connection to fuel the demand of new green value chains that are coming up, then industry players will choose other locations. So I think that's and that's both a short-term and a long-term challenge for the government, because they need it. It will take time to develop the grid, but this is measures that they try to do it faster. But on the very short term, we also need to do storage and battery, increase that use of battery, for example, as a measure.
Okay. I guess there are tensions at play, though. So clearly, one could argue that, and there's a very live debate in the UK, for example, going on at the moment about a tension between decarbonisation and achieving our environmental commitments versus the affordability of doing so. And, you know, if I look at where carbon is trading today across Europe and the UK and the impact that has on domestic and business consumer bills, you could raise as many eyebrows. There's other tensions at play, of course, as well, with regards to the balance of profitability and environmental conformity. Daxita, I guess, coming from the sustainability side, have you seen examples of where that balance is managed well in businesses?
Well, I think, if you haven't kind of implemented sustainability into your business ethos, you are off the bandwagon. We all know that there's now an urgent need for businesses to look beyond just the bottom line. Businesses with ESG principles built into their strategy can not only mitigate risk, but drive profitable growth. Being a company with a purpose, as ENGIE, we have integrated sustainability in our company's core strategy with the intent of extending its radius and responsibility beyond just the immediate benefit, but looking at really the long-term growth of the organization. And just looking at that, I mean, if you are not already on addressing the climate action goals, it will become a challenge for most businesses. And we started to see most investors like Lloyds Bank in 2018 announce that they will not fund any new coal-fired power stations or thermal coal mines anymore. This is just, strategic moves by investors to really look at investing in businesses that have a clear, sustainable strategy, and it's really about mitigating risk. Second to that is the French bank Credit Mutuel had the largest drop in fossil fuel financing, where they saw a 100% decline, which was amounted to about $19 million in 2016 to almost zero in 2020. So, investors are now looking at longevity, and they're starting to question, are these organizations, or is my investment really going to be risk-free? And understandable, nothing is risk-free, but what element of risk is acceptable, and is it being managed? And I think that is really just the question around balancing profitability with environmental, conformity or management.
Thanks. Makes absolute sense. I share your views. Adele, anything to add from a Lightsource perspective on this?
Yes, I think so. It's actually quite interesting. We had a very extensive debate within the organization about sustainability, and actually it's one of our 5 key values, and it's really underlined our very purpose of existence as an organization, to the point that a lot of people would naturally think that sustainability is not necessarily one of your key concerns, because you are building solar farms, right? So what is greener than that? What is more sustainable than that? But I think we take that responsibility quite seriously on really the entire life cycle of our sites. So, and I agree with Daxita on the point that really there is very difficult now to move in whichever environment or market environment you find yourself, because the stakeholders are desperately asking for responsibility, sustainability, and a sustainable approach to your business. And this is not just the investor and lenders, which we live on a daily basis, but even from our own employees. So for us, really, sustainability is the very core of what we develop. And I'm going to move from the very high level macro conversation that we had to talking about bees. So please bear with me for a second. I'll explain why. But one of the amazing examples of how solar energy, or to be fair, quite a variety of different renewables, not just solar, can really help stepping up the sustainability efforts and journeys is really in how the sites are developed. And how do we foresee then waste management whenever we leave the sites, but also how do we develop the biodiversity plans. So all of a good chunk of our plants have pollinators and bees grazing at not intensive level, and we are actually studying how the presence of renewables is increasing the biodiversity as opposed to being a detriment of the biodiversity. So for us is really part of our mission to say not only we can provide decentralized, low cost electricity from a renewable source, but we can also help the other element of the climate challenge, which is the lack of biodiversity and the constant reduction of the diversity of species. So it really becomes embedded. And I think it's even from does it cost us more to undertake this type of biodiversity plans? Yes, it does. But the advantage of commitment and talent that our employees dedicate to this type of project is unparalleled. And I think it well compensate any additional cost that we might incur because we want to be a bit more radical in what we deploy from a biodiversity perspective. So the economics of sustainability we really think is actually self-sustained. And not just in the long run, but even in the medium to short term.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, increasingly we're talking about decarbonisation, biodiversity, sort of hand in hand, and we realise that you can't, just have a myopic focus on one area of sustainability. But nonetheless challenging, particularly given the amount of low carbon infrastructure that needs to be built over the next decades. So talking and thinking more about projects that are being developed or have been developed here and now that, in your opinion, are cutting edge or demonstrating innovation at play. Could you give some examples of projects that have been developed by your organisation or that you've had, you've been well informed about that you'd like to sort of showcase? Guro, could we start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. We're doing quite a lot of the innovation across different sectors, and two innovation projects that I can mention that we've recently deployed. One is I think as recent as in May, we deployed a stationary battery concept for fast chargers as an energy station in a cooperation with Circle K. And that's as a fully renewable could also be microgrid, but it's tied to the grid as well with solar panels on the roof, battery, and it's tied to the fast chargers. And depending, of course, on the battery size and how much solar production you have, you can run it as a microgrid. And we haven't seen that done before, even though it sounds very simple as well. I haven't seen it done before in the Nordics, actually. And this solution is a solution that enables charging infrastructure many places where it would not otherwise be enough grid capacity. Hence, it contributes to the decarbonisation of the transport sector and the goals that we have in Norway and also in EU. And what we've learned through these months that we've had it running now, this first station, is that even though stationary batteries are still expensive, we've learned that the value stacking of the revenue side can bring these stationary batteries actually profitable, even in Norway, which have quite low energy prices compared to Europe. And that main elements is where you can avoid expensive grid investments and where you can use the battery as additional peak shaving during operations, and also where you can participate in balancing and flex markets with the battery. There you can see profitability, and of course it needs to be profitable as well as green to have it scaled out, these innovation projects. So that is one thing that we will look to scale further. And a different one I picked up, many people before as well today had talked about energy efficiency. And we're also having a smart energy efficiency solution that we have developed through a startup, because we're doing innovation also in startup level. So we acquired a startup, and the aim is to reduce waste of electricity in buildings, and it has such a huge potential. And in Norway, we have a goal of, I think, 10 terawatt hours savings by 2030. And then that's, I think, equal to the amount that it takes to electrify the Norwegian continental shelf. So it is, and I think the goal is not even the capacity of the waste. There is so much we can save. And this current solution, it's almost like a Shazam or Soundhound for energy. It's you put on a simple installation of a meter, and then using signal processing and machine learning and AI, then we're listening in and learning and understanding what's actually been using energy in real time. So it can isolate heating and cooling systems, lights, refrigerators, engines and pumps, etc. So you can see it stacked, what is actually using energy in your residential building or your commercial building at every time. And then we're able to save 10 to 30% energy most places we install. And that is kind of free electricity to spend on other decarbonization solutions elsewhere. And we should really, it's such a low-hanging fruit. And I think all these innovations that we can add on, that will free up any electricity that we can use somewhere else, and just stop this wasting energy. That's definitely something that we need to stack all the measures we can take to get to net zero.
Thanks, Guro. Adele, would you like to give some insight to innovative projects where you've been involved?
Yeah, so I think we are running a couple of hydrogen pilots. Clearly, we are not alone. This is the the hot topic of the year, I would say. So we are running pilots in Portugal, in Wales, in Australia as well, and particularly we're looking at both green and blue hydrogen, ammonia production, carbon capture, and how we can help low carbon process for steel and cement production. This is particularly in our South Wales industrial cluster, but it's still a bit early days. So what I would really like to share is an example of what actually we can do with existing technology to use it differently, and perhaps help the transmission and distribution grid to be managed and stabilized more effectively and in a more cost-effective way. So as being part of a system more than a single individual generator. A specific project that we run is called a reactive power project, and we ran 3 years of research together with National Grid and one of the UK DNOs, UKPN. And from November 2019, we started deliver reactive power at night, and we simply had to change the settings of our inverter. So it's a piece of equipment that we will naturally use and use every day for the generation of active power during the day. And we use it for the generation of reactive power at night time, so that the DNO UKPN can manage the network voltage more effectively. And why this is so fascinating for me is that really is not additional cost and is generating value for another party within the general transmission and generation environment and ecosystem. We have assessed that, so our site is in Southeast England. We have assessed that if all of the solar generator located in Southeast England could unlock their ability of generating reactive power at night, then we could actually add another 4 gigawatt of generating capacity by 2050. And this will actually reflect in a few hundred millions of saving in power bills for the UK customers. So it's a pretty impressive exercise. It's quite simple actually, and the technology is already there. But if as an industry and the group of generators, we can embrace this type of opportunities, then we can really make a difference to how the system is managed and how the distribution is managed, and actually be part of the solution, as opposed to simply create some headaches here and there.
Yeah, I think quite often when we talk about innovation, we immediately launch into new technologies that have some way to go yet before they're commercial and at scale, without thinking about just how many kind of smaller innovations we can make with the technology, structure, data that we already have at hand. So yeah, very interesting to hear that particular example. We've mentioned the role of the customer and the customer becoming closer to energy, more informed in energy, and the role of the customer engagement in achieving net zero and decarbonisation. If we think about decarbonisation of transport and perhaps storage, which is starting to get a bit more closer to daily lives, to homes and businesses. Can you give your view on, what the future is here? Are we on a kind of pure growth trajectory to electric transportation, to total decentralisation, to using our heating systems as flexible assets, etc., etc.? Would be very interested to hear, what vision for the future is with customer engagement and how quickly it could happen. Adele, maybe if I go to you first on this.
Okay. I think I'd like to talk a bit about one of our satellite companies called Lightsource Labs, and this really, is a creative lab really, but is what we will. When we look at energy transition, we look at digitalization, decarbonisation, and democratization, and this is really the last of the 3D. And it's really a company that is helping us designing hardware and software that can be used by households, so residential customer, to monitor, control, and schedule their energy use. And it comes from clearly the installation of solar, but then and a battery, but also the use of home heating as a secondary storage opportunity, and the use of electric car as a third level of storage opportunity. But what we are really trying to look at is to what extent we can create networks in similar areas with customers using the similar tool for them to supply and feed electricity to each other, and create an aggregation platform that is pretty democratic, where actually customers can decide how to get their supply and how to supply each other potentially. So it's a pretty exciting exercise from that perspective. The technology and the energy management system are there. They can be more or less automated. They can be completely remote and driven by artificial intelligence, or the keys can be handled to the customer and they can really schedule the way they want to use their energy consumption and their generation from their solar panels, or to be fair, consume some of the energy that they have stored in their car. And the uptake in some of the markets that we are working on, which are primarily Australia, Spain, and the UK, is actually quite impressive. Customers seems to really like the idea that they are empowered about how they can use their electricity, and also that they are empowered at controlling how they are not wasting that electricity. To Guro's point, that sometimes efficiency is actually a pretty low-hanging fruit that we probably didn't have invested as much as we wanted to. So we really believe that this type of products that we are kind of incubating in Lightsource Labs is really the future, and is not just about this individual, it's about how multiple users can come together as a community of users, and as a consequence increase the level of efficiency quite significantly. So watch the space, we're gonna roll it out as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Good. Daxita, have you got anything to add on this point about consumer engagement in net zero or wider sustainability?
Yes, absolutely. There's two parts to the energy transition. Is really just around decarbonizing our energy sector, and it's around really about energy efficiency. And that is a big component about the whole supporting the climate change goals and commitments that we put forward. So supporting our clients is a big element around decarbonization. So it's about how can we drive energy efficiency, where can we monopolize on those low-hanging fruits that are, easier for a client to be engaged and look at the greater picture without really wanting to invest immediately. And a big element of the decarbonization, as a group, we have a strong commitment to support our clients on that decarbonization journey, where we will try to avoid 45 million tons of CO2 just through providing those energy efficient solutions. And it's about, really engaging with your clients or your customers, looking at financial ways to support them, investing in projects, co-ownerships, corporate PPAs, I think are big elements that drive the energy efficiency transition for many of the clients that are willing to want to participate, but don't necessarily have a starting point to start the journey.
Thanks. So I guess linked to that, and something that's inherent in some of the examples you've all talked about today is data, digitalization, making the interface for people to engage with this invisible thing we call electricity and energy that just happens through the end actions like turning a light on or whatever. And I guess there's been, huge efforts to improve, certainly from a digital interface side, energy in different forms to consumers and to the public, and to, demystify some of what we deal with in the sector. Be really interested in hearing your experiences or learnings of when, working with data, presenting it in digital form has been really successful in driving innovation, and maybe also some learnings about where we've got big challenges as a sector. Open to who comes in. Maybe Adele, would you like to start?
Of course. So I think starting from the value that we are getting from our data, I think we have looked quite extensively at, so we have a very high level of wealth of data coming from our operational sites. So we have been looking in the past couple of years on how we can make sure that we use the data to optimize our production and predict it as much as possible, be as reliable as we can possibly be. And that is a significant investment, both from a software data lake, data architecture perspective, but also from a people perspective. We might have to invest into people skills that we didn't necessarily have, or to retrain some of the people that we have to get to the skills. I think what I have learned is that there is a lot of value in the data, but ultimately digitalization is about people, and is about how do we empower our people to make better decisions. And how do we empower our people to operate our sites better, more effectively, more efficiently. And I think as an industry, I have the horrible impression that we are kind of missing a trick, because as much as we have a lot of data, we really struggle to share it. And it's not surprising, because it's extremely competitive. I can look at the solar developer market, or even construction and operation it's extremely competitive. People are very, very close to their data, which is, from that perspective, understandable. But to be fair, we have a lot to learn from every single failure that we go through. And we're kind of missing that opportunity, because it's still very difficult to get the players in the market comfortable enough to share their operational experience at this level. We are very happy to share guidelines, best practices, lessons learned. As Lightsource VP, we contribute to a number of publications from Solar Power Europe, where we share our ways of working and what we have deployed as a strategy to operate our sites and further develop our sites better. But the data itself, as an industry, I think we are still a bit reluctant in sharing this. And I'm hoping that we will be able in the next few years to get to a level of maturity where we are actually more comfortable in sharing and learning from each other to accelerate further the penetration of renewables in the energy generation mix.
Okay, thanks for that. Guro, anything you'd like to add on this subject of data digitization?
Yeah, I can at least definitely say that accelerating sustainable innovation definitely goes through partnerships, and maybe that this barrier to sharing data may be overcome on a short term through bilateral agreements. But it's definitely on the longer term. I think I heard also in an earlier panel today someone mentioning that the maturity of this energy markets on data sharing is lower than actually the oil and gas part, because you could have data from 30-year-old assets, but you couldn't have data from a new wind farm. But so I think there is something that along that, and possibly bilateral agreements on data sharing can be a short-term solution for overcoming some of the barriers.
Yep. Daxita, anything to add from a sustainability side, and I guess insight on the importance of data and sharing there?
As Adele and Guro was mentioned, I think data and digitalization coupled with, the new technology or the Internet of Things is really driving new innovation, changes, and transformation. And two parts of it. First of all, data, if not used properly, drives no change. Secondly, data at the hands of someone that does not know what to do with it is super inefficient. So the key thing on two parts is that having the right information and from a power production is super important. It's because it can help you with trends, patterns, peaks, demands, driving better efficiency from an asset and a power generation perspective, as Adele mentioned, which is vital around the decarbonization elements. The second area is data from a smaller scale around energy efficiency within buildings at the hands of a customer. It can and it will help them drive better business decisions, better strategies, and from a financial perspective, if they have the right data, there's financial savings around that. But it's how it's used. And the one thing that is really starting to come to play is the Internet of Things and sustainable cities. Everything is interconnected. And it's all through data and information. One being, the use of blockchain technology that secures the privacy issues and the data confidentiality aspects. But the other aspect of it is that how can it be used to the advantage of driving innovation, driving changes, and driving the decarbonization elements of it. And I find one example to just end the conversation is that, around renewable energy, everybody has a question around, the inefficiency of weather changes, around solar panels and solar efficiency. But the question is that with innovation around data, you can predict weather patterns. You can start changing the process of, your solar technology to better enhance around those capacities and those days where the sun is shining bright. So yes, it's really about using the data to the best of your ability.
Okay, thank you. I'm just checking for questions, and I can't see any pop up on Hopin, so people are either violently agreeing with you, which I hope's the case, or just still thinking about what to ask. I guess the way I'd like to close the panel discussion is for you all to share a key learning, with regards to your experience in the industry and in decarbonisation, sustainability efforts, and what would you like to kind of gift the audience with as a pearl of wisdom? Guro, I'm going to start with you, please.
No
Put
pressure,
you on the spot.
Right? No, I've been working a lot with innovation, and my personal learning from that within sustainability and doing cutting edge innovation and tech development is that you make sure that yourself and your team and your customers are are reminded continuously why and how this solution or innovation or product or service that you're delivering is meaningful, and how it contributes in the bigger picture to the decarbonization or to increase the electrification as a society, and hence contribute to the decarbonization, because people like to be part of meaningful business and the bigger picture. So that's when sometimes in innovation say that we don't want to have develop cool innovations looking for a use case, but we would rather do cool innovations for decarbonization, meaningful decarbonization. Yeah.
So put the importance of purpose.
Yeah.
In innovation. That's great.
And reminding ourselves about it all the time, because it's easy to forget when you're deep diving into the tech solutions.
That's true. Adele, any learning you'd like to share?
I think it is about being patient and relentless at the same time, and never forget that ultimately is about people and their sense of fulfillment in either the wider purpose of the company or the specific purpose of the transformation and the innovation, but is really not dropping the bone and keep on thinking about alternative, embracing change is very much what is driving us at this stage. Patience is absolutely necessary. We are an heavily regulated market anyway, and therefore very often things are not as straightforward as we would like them to be, but it's not a good enough reason to give up.
Okay, that's great. Daxita, any learning from you?
So I would like to leave three, key messages. The first one is that a circular transformation is really required. So when you're looking at anything, look at it from an entire life cycle approach, and start from there. The second, public-private partnerships are key ways of supporting country goals, climate change goals as a global issue. And the third one, which you've touched on, is the innovation. Innovation is not about reinventing the wheel. Innovation is about driving simple efficiency.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. All of them very much resonate. I think a final thought for me is about the importance of co-creation, collaboration, sharing. And we've actually had a comment on the Q&A about if someone wanted to be in touch with any of the panelists with that in mind, with co-creation in mind, how would they do so? I presume you're all on LinkedIn. Am I correct? Yeah, there you go. So I presume that's the easiest way for people to make contact. Okay, and I think with that, we come to the end of the panel. So thank you very much. It's a shame we didn't get Olivia to join us, but I think we managed as an awesome foursome. So thank you very much to the panel of speakers. Very interesting session. And I hope that's been useful, interesting, made a few people think in the audience today. Thank you. Bye-bye.